I've wanted to make a video about this album for the longest, but I never got around to it. I feel like with the day I'm releasing this video being my birthday, April 26th, I feel like this is the right time to talk about one of my favorite albums of all time. But before I get more into the video, I would first like to thank you guys for coming to see this. If you like the content, you should like, comment, and subscribe to help the channel grow. Also, follow my Instagram too. That would be greatly appreciated. You guys can always reach out and just show me some love. It's all good. Let me know where you're tuning in from. Represent where you're from, especially if representing Harlem. Comment down below your favorite songs from Diplomatic community and why. Most importantly, comment down below what it was like for you when this album first dropped, because those are my favorite comments to read. Without further ado, let's get into the video. I normally start off this series with the year prior to a project releasing. I think a great starting point is Cam's arrival to Rockefeller Records. Before Rockefeller, Camron was with Epic Records. While on Epic, he started getting wise to the music business because a woman at Epic was putting him on game and telling him what the label wasn't doing for him. Camron would then go to Dame Dash, one of the three heads of Rockefeller at this time, who he had known for a long time. Dame told Camron that if he managed to get out of his deal with Epic, then he would give him one of his distributions. According to Cam, he would go up to Epic Records pretty much every day with 40 dudes to make people in there feel uncomfortable, and ultimately Cam was released from the label. While Cam was free from the label, he has admitted that he was pretty much dead broke at this point before signing to Rockefeller. His first album, Confessions of Fire, went gold, but his second album, SDE, didn't do all that well. Things would change for him in 2001 when in December of that year, Camron would officially join Rockefeller. He didn't waste any time because 5 months later, in May of 2002, he would release the album Come Home With Me. This album would peak at number 2 on the Billboard 200, selling 226,000 copies in its first week. The album also had 2 monster hit records, with the lead single being Oh Boy, which peaked at number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100. The second single for the album would be Hey Ma, which peaked at number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100. This would be a complete turnaround in the direction that Cam's career was going while he was on Epic. Now he had one of the hottest albums with 2 of the hottest songs in the country. But now that Cam was out of the way, he really wanted to get Joel Santana established as an artist and get Jim Jones established as an artist and director. Joel's would feature on Oh Boy and Hey Ma, which would be a huge look for him at the time, with those being big top 5 records in the country. Jim Jones would be featured on the Come Home With Me album, as well as being credited as a director for the Oh Boy and Hey Ma music videos. Freaky Zeke features on Come Home With Me as well. 2002 proved to be a very busy year for Dipset because they would drop 3 mixtapes, the Diplomats Volume 1, 2, and 3. They quite literally flooded the streets with music. Essentially, half of the songs from Diplomatic community are comprised of songs that were originally on these 3 mixtapes alone. That's not even counting the Diplomats Volume 4 mixtape that was released right before Diplomatic community and increases the number of songs that appeared on their mixtapes that would end up on their debut album. Things were going really good for the crew, but however, things weren't all peaches and cream because the group had problems behind the scenes at Rockefeller. Cam has always had a weird beef with Jay-Z, but not only this, but the group would have some heat from people on the label due to how they were moving. Everything was happening really fast because, as I mentioned, after signing with Rockefeller, Cam released Come Home With Me less than 5 months later. Less than a year after Come Home With Me, the Diplomats released their debut album. But did you know that Diplomatic Immunity was originally set to come out in 2002 instead of 2003? Yes, Diplomatic Immunity was originally named Ground Zero and was supposed to release in October of 2002. Bout It Part 3 was set to be the first single for the album. The song Built the City was planned to be the second single. Ground Zero, the album, was set to be a dedication to New York after 9/11. Jim Jones in an interview with MTV in 2002 would explain that the making of the album Ground Zero started around 9/11. Ground Zero went on to be Diplomatic Immunity, and as we know, the album didn't come out in October of 2002. December of 2002 was another planned date for the project, but it would be delayed again into 2003. So Diplomatic Immunity could have came out way sooner if it wasn't for the delays. A fun fact that I never knew was that Dipset were planning to have their own movie called Come Home With Me, which Jim Jones was set to direct. They were supposed to film the movie before the end of the summer in 2002. The movie was about Dipset and their story of how they came up in the hood to their transition to music. Jim Jones compared the movie to being similar to Master P's 1997 movie I'm Bout It and Jay-Z's 1998 movie Streets Is Watching. The difference is that the Dipset movie was going to be more focused according to Jim Jones. It definitely makes sense why Dipset would want to have a movie at the time, because Rockefeller put out 3 movies in 2002 alone and was working on another in 2002 which came out in 2003 called Death of a Dynasty. As some may already know, State Property, which was a group that were signed to Rockefeller at the time, had their own movie that released in 2002 and went on to become a hood classic. It even spawned a sequel in which members of Dipset appeared in. It would have been cool to see a Dipset movie in this time period, but it just ended up never panning out. Diplomatic Immunity would end up finally releasing in March of 2003, peaking at number 8 on the Billboard 200, selling 92,000 copies in its first week. This album really represents a lot to the members of Dipset because going into this album, they really had a chip on their shoulders. Camron would leave Epic Records, nearly went broke, and would end up signing with Rockefeller. Now on this new label, Cam and the crew ended up going crazy and worked non-stop to stake their claim in the rap game. About Diplomatic Immunity, Jim Jones would say, "That album showed people you can never let anything stop your dreams. It don't matter where you at in the world, cause we started from the bottom of the bottom in the projects with nothing to offer. We had to get everything and earn everything. So for us to be here and overcome all the things that we did and all the great things we accomplished is everything." That album was the beginning of an era that changed the face of hip hop. For those who don't know what Diplomatic Immunity stands for, by definition, diplomatic immunity is a principle of international law by which certain foreign government officials are recognized as having legal immunity from the jurisdiction of another country. The more you know. This will wrap up the first part of the video where I discuss the history leading up to the album, and in the second part of the video, I will break down the history behind each track. The first disc of the album starts off with the track Un Casa, which features Dipset member Un Casa. This was one of the members of Dipset that was being built up at this time, so this track was used to spotlight his talent. Right after this would come the Juelz Santana interlude. It's just a simple interlude talking about the album, which fades into the song Who I Am. A lot of people refer to this track as Who Am I, most likely due to the song sampling the 1972 track Who Am I by the OJ. This is a very emotional song, which is all Juelz Santana. The hook in the verse about his mom just really gets to me. Really dope track and one of my favorites on the album. Ground Zero is the 4th track on the album, which largely talks about the 9/11 attacks that tragically occurred 2 years prior to the release of this album in 2001. Dipset mentioned those attacks a lot in their music, especially around this time. The members of Dipset are from New York City, so they saw the effects of the tragedy firsthand. However, some of the members of Dipset have said some, let's just say, questionable things about the tragedy, which we'll get into a little later. But after Ground Zero, we come across the first of multiple interludes on the album. The first interlude being the Real Dudes interlude, which was led by Freaky Zeke. He's responsible for a lot of the skits and interludes on the Dipset albums, and the dude is hilarious to say the least. The Real Dudes interlude then fades into the track Real Dudes. The meaning of this track and its message is really self-explanatory. We wouldn't have to wait much longer for our next interlude on the album, which is Have You Seen Juelz Santana? Santana. Once again, Freaky leads the interlude and he's trying to holler at a girl, and the girl tells him that she's looking for Juelz Santana. Freaky Zeke then flips out on her because of this, and this then leads into the next track, More Than Music. Juelz Santana would start off this track, and songs like Hey Ma Remix and I Love You would appear on the Diplomats Volume 3 mixtape. Juelz Santana really led the album to this point, but with the song Beautiful Noise, Jim Jones would now take the lead. Jim's first verse in the song is notable because this is the same exact verse that he spit on an episode of Rap City. It's the episode where the members of Dipset rap over the My Block beat by Scarface and Camron counts the money. Iconic. But something that is way more iconic is the 10th track on the album, which is Dipset Anthem. This classic beat was done by the Heatmakers, who were working with Dipset a lot around this time. In total, the Heatmakers are credited for 11 of the 27 tracks on the double album. Arsonist of the Heatmakers would do an episode on the Genius YouTube channel breaking down how the beat for the song was made. Really dope videos that you should definitely check out if you're into that kind of thing. Arsonist is from Jamaica, and prior to making the beat, he always wanted to find a reggae song that he could flip into some hip hop. 1 in a Million by Sanchez would be the song that was sampled for this track. Arsonist was faced with the challenge of turning a sample around 5 or 6 seconds and making it into a 4-minute beat. The job ended up getting done, and this turned into one of the greatest rap beats of all time. Once again, Juelz Santana kicks off the song, and he has probably the most memorable verse on the song. He really sets the mood for the track, and in an interview with Revo TV, Juelz would say, "I wrote that while being stuck in a basement in Chicago because I wasn't writing rhymes, I was slacking. We were on tour, I wasn't writing any rhymes, and Cam kept asking me, yo, let me hear something. For 3 days, I ain't gave him nothing new. So we did a show in Chicago, and I'm about to go to the after party with them until Cam asked me again, yo, spit something for me. I told him I ain't got it, and he said, when you get it, then you can come to the party. So I went down to the basement and made Dipset Anthem. When they got back from the club that night, it was done. It took me about 3 hours. As great as this song is, there was a chance that it could have never came out. Arsonist in an interview would say that he was moments away from throwing away the Dipset Anthem beat when his cousin walked into the studio. His cousin called him crazy for trying to get rid of the beat, which was originally made in 2001, 2 years before it would appear on Diplomatic Immunity. The Dipset Anthem beat would be the 5th beat made the day that the beat was done. By this time, Arsonist's ears were fried and he couldn't tell what sounded good anymore. By this time, he thought that the beat was trash. Down the line, the song was eventually made, but the song was moments away from missing out on the final track listing for Diplomatic Immunity. The song was handed into Def Jam right before the deadline. Arsonist credits the song for making the final track list due to Cam's request being approved due to his excitement over the song. By this time, Cam had generated goodwill among the boardroom suits due to his debut album Rockefeller going platinum in December of 2002. Despite this, Arsonist still feels like the people at the top didn't fully see the potential of the Diplomats or the song Dipset Anthem. It was a fight to get their music out there. A fun fact about this song is that in 2016, there was a petition to change the national anthem of the United States to the Dipset Anthem. I remember when this was going around in 2016, and I thought that it was hilarious, but the reason why this came about was because this was around the whole Colin Kaepernick kneeling during the national anthem situation. Some people wanted the national anthem to be changed, and this was one of the songs that got suggested, but as we know, it never became the national anthem. While Juelz Santana did great with his parts in the song, a part of his second verse is known for sparking a lot of controversy. I've talked about this situation so much throughout the history of this channel. A quick explanation of what happened is Juelz in his verse shouted out Cam for taking over Rockefeller. This was a problem because Jay-Z at this time was one of the 3 heads of Rockefeller. The story goes that Jay-Z was on vacation, and while he was on vacation, he would learn that Camron would be granted a vice president role at Rockefeller Records. Dame Dash, who was one of the other two heads of Rockefeller, wanted Camron and Beanie Sigel to hold vice president positions in the company. The problem was that according to Dame Dash, Camron was moving a lot quicker than Beanie Sigel, and the plans to make him a VP were prematurely announced before negotiations could start. Cam went on Rap City back in the day and talked about this situation and repeated what Dame told him. This obviously pissed a lot of people off at Rockefeller, including Jay-Z, because he didn't sign off on the Cam vice president thing. Jewel's rapping about this on Dipset Anthem didn't make matters any better. Hey Ma remix would come right after this, and this is of course a remix to Cam's smash hit Hey Ma, which appeared on his album Come Home With Me. After the Hey Ma remix, we get the third interlude of the album. This is the Hell Rel interlude. Freaky Zeke would start off this interlude by dedicating this interlude for the people who were locked up at the time. Sometime during the making of this album, Hell Rel of Dipset got locked up and ended up serving a sentence on drug-related charges at the Clinton Maximum Security Correctional Facility in Dannemora, New York. In this interlude, Hell Rel would freestyle over the phone while he was incarcerated. This is one of the two jail freestyles he would have on this album. He did end up recording verses prior to being locked up, so this is how you end up hearing him on songs on the album such as This Is What I Do and Built This City. Speaking of This Is What I Do, this would come right after the Hell Rel interlude, and this song would appear on the Diplomats Volume 3 mixtape as well. Other songs that appear on Diplomatic Immunity that would also appear on this mixtape are I Really Mean It, Bout It, I Love You, Juelz Santana the Great, I'm Ready, and The First. The track Gangsta would come right after This Is What I Do, and this song would originally appear on the Diplomats Volume 1 mixtape. The track that would close out the first disc of 2 for this album would be the second and last Hell Rel freestyle. Personally, I feel like both CDs for this album are pretty even in terms of bangers, but I personally prefer the second CD over the first. Let me know how you feel about this in the comment section below. The second CD for Diplomatic Immunity would start with the track I Really Mean It. The beat for this song was done by Just Blaze, and this along with the song We Built This City, which he also produced, was sitting around for a long time. Just Blaze didn't make these beats for anyone in particular. The beat for I Really Mean It would sit around for about a year before Cam, Jim, and Juelz came to the studio and worked with Just Blaze. Prior to this, Just Blaze hadn't seen the group in a while. This meant that Just Blaze didn't have anything for them specifically, but he did have some old beats lying around. By this point, not only did Cam have tension with Jay-Z, but Cam also had problems with Nas as well, which is a whole other story. Just Blaze, in an interview with Complex, talked about the history behind this track and mentioned that I Really Mean It is a diss track towards Nas to a certain degree. This bothered Just Blaze a little bit, but at the end of the day, he thought that the record was crazy. Originally, the song was just Jim Jones and Juelz, but after hearing the track, Kim knew that he had to take the song. Before the song was officially released, it appeared on a Funk Flex mixtape, which is why on the song you can hear Jim Jones shout out Funk Flex. This is also notable because Just Blaze mentioned that Nas and Funk Flex had beef at the time, so Dipset were riding with Funk Flex. After I Really Mean It, we hear the first of 5 phone skits on the second disc of Diplomatic Immunity. My Love featuring Freeway would be next, and unfortunately, outside of this being a good track, there's not much history behind it. This, however, doesn't apply for the song after this, which is the song I Love You. Lyrics from this song by Juelz Santana would cause a lot of controversy. Earlier I mentioned that the song I Love You would first appear on the Diplomats Volume 2 mixtape. The version of I Love You that would appear on the Diplomats Volume 2 mixtape would have a different beat, and the Volume 2 version would contain different lines that ended up being replaced on Diplomatic Immunity. Originally, Juelz Santana rapped that he admired the courage of Muhammad Ammar Atta, who was one of the people who drove a plane into the Twin Towers on 9/11. He compared this courage courage of Muhammad from being behind the wheel of a plane to his courage while he was dealing drugs. This received a lot of backlash in 2002, but Juelz in an interview that year would say that he didn't regret the line, "I feel my diplomats are my team and I'm gonna do whatever it takes for them, for my people, the same way as he did for his people. Not that I support him or what he did, but in order for him to do that, it had to take courage and love for what he believed in. A lot of New York people don't have that. Maybe if they did, something like that wouldn't happen." Juelz would further say that people were willfully misinterpreting his lyrics in order to paint him as a supporter of terrorism. He would say that he didn't worship Muhammad himself, but worshipped his courage. The line had nothing to do with 9/11 or Juelz supporting what happened because he knew people in the towers that fell. Juelz was also questioned if he thought that the line would impact his career, which he felt that it wouldn't, and he ended up being right about that. He did say that when Diplomatic Immunity would be released, he wouldn't change the line, which is false because the line ended up being changed on the album. Instead of mentioning Muhammad Amar Atta on the Diplomatic Immunity version, Juelz would replace his name with the late great Muhammad Ali. Still to this day, Juelz has always stood by his controversial lyrics in the song. Personally, I feel like he shouldn't have said it, and I also prefer the Muhammad Ali line way more, but enough about this song. Purple Haze would end up being the 4th track on the 2nd disc of Diplomatic Immunity. Purple Haze would end up being the name of Cam's album that released a year after Diplomatic Immunity in 2004. That album was originally supposed to come out in 2003, but that album ended up getting delayed multiple times and was pushed back to 2004. If you want to know more about the history behind Purple Haze, I just made a video about it, so I'll put a link in the description for you guys. The song Purple Haze would then transition into the song The First, which is Dipset paying homage to Bone Thugs and Harmony. It's their version of the Bone Thugs song First of the Month. The song Juelz Santana the Great and DJ Enough Freestyle are 2 tracks that came after the song The First. I've already talked about Juelz Santana the Great, but the DJ Enough Freestyle was originally on the Diplomats Volume 4 mixtape simply titled Freestyle. When the song got put on Diplomatic Immunity, it was renamed DJ Enough Freestyle, with DJ Enough being a DJ based in New York. Right after the DJ Enough Freestyle comes the song What's Really Good featuring DMX. I also forgot to mention earlier that this song would originally appear on the Diplomats Volume 3 mixtape prior to being on Diplomatic Immunity. I'm Ready would be the 4th to last song on Diplomatic Immunity. One of my favorite songs on the album, and Jim's verse in this song is probably my favorite from him ever. This and his first verse on the song Flyboys are my 2 favorites from him for sure. He went insane on them songs. Bout It Part 3 would come next, and this would be the 3rd part of Master P's Bout It song. The series would first start on True's album True, which released in 1995. The second Bout It would appear on Master P's album Ice Cream Man, which released in 1996. Cam happened to be listening to the original Bout It song, and he thought that the song was hot, so he wanted to do it over. Him and Dipset would link with Master P and film the music video for the track in Harlem. Jim Jones would co-direct this video. But the thing that I really admire about Dipset is that they show love to everybody. They had songs like Certified Gangsters for the West Coast, Bout It Part 3 for the South, and The First for the Midwest. Built This City, which was the 2nd to last track on the 2nd disc of Diplomatic Immunity, would be produced by Just Blaze. The idea for the sample of the song, which is We Built This City by Starship, came from Jim Jones. The funny thing is that Jim Jones would approach Just Blaze about the idea to use the sample for the song. Jim was going on and on about this until Just Blaze informed him that he had already used the sample for a beat that he made 3 years prior. Jim didn't believe this until Just Blaze played it for him, and Jim would end up hopping on the song immediately, and the rest is history. Finally, the 2nd disc of Diplomatic Immunity would conclude with the song Let's Go, which samples the song Let's Get It On by Marvin Gaye, and this would be the end of Diplomatic Immunity. Such a classic album, a double disc album at that. This album would end up being very influential, and 20 years after its release, it still rings off to this day. For a lot of people, this album was a moment in time in an era that can never be recaptured. All in all, let me know what you thought of this video. I love you guys with all my heart. Peace.